Hey everyone, I'm Kris Blackmon, Chief Channel Officer over at industry consultancy JS Group. And I'm here today to talk to Matt Solomon on behalf of channelWise. So what is channelWise, first and foremost? channelWise provides on-demand expert training for the channel. We know the channel, we know its challenges, we've been there, we've done that, and we are here to help partners go farther, faster. So like I said, today we're here to talk to Matt Solomon, who is no stranger to any of you. Matt has more than 18 years of experience in sales and business development, and he had the unique experience of helping build out the channel for one of its fastest growing startups, ID Agent, going from 0 to more than 5,000 partners. In December of 2021, he teamed up with ID Agent's founder, and the duo launched Channel Program. So welcome, Matt. How are you?
Doing great. It's great to see you. Thank you for having me.
So, Matt, I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about Channel Program before we get into your areas of expertise. So what's it all about?
Sure. Yeah, and it's evolved so much just in the last 11 months. But really what we're building is we want to become the #1 source for MSPs to evaluate their stack. We know about 50% of the chatter between MSPs and various forums is all about the stack. It's what product are you using for XYZ and this product versus this product, comparing competitors and things like that. And so what we're trying to do is bring back more transparency and really have it be peer validation. So in the last 3 months, we launched product reviews, for example, and they're not like Reddit. You actually have to put your name on it. So if you're an MSP and you're doing a product review, your name's there. And we've gotten over 800 or right around 800 product reviews just in the last 3 months. So it's it's a two-sided marketplace, obviously between the vendors and the MSPs, but bring it together in a more holistic approach, giving the MSPs more access to the emerging vendors. And look, the big vendors are part of our platform, but there's a lot of great new vendors coming out in the marketplace probably every couple of weeks, to be honest. And so we wanted to give more voice to more vendors and have the MSPs have the ability to evaluate.
You're right. There are a ton of emerging vendors coming into the channel. We work with a lot of them over at JS Group, and it's exciting bringing them into the ecosystem. So one of the things I love the most about Channel Program is that you and I both go to a lot of industry events, right? And so we get to see vendors in person, we get to hear their pitches, but not every partner has the resources to do that. So Channel Program really kind of allows them to see those demos, to hear those pitches, even if they don't have the resources to go to those events. I love that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's almost where it started. It started from having conversations with vendors saying, how do I make a name for myself if I don't have $2 million to spend on events? And right. you and I both know there's no comparison on the ROI if you're speaking at an event versus just having a booth. And so that's what we're trying to raise voices on both sides of the community.
Well, I love it. And I have had clients who have participated with great success. So over at JS Group, we are all about Channel Program.
Thank you.
So I do want to jump back a little bit, though, and I want to talk about ID Agent. So you were the first employee at ID Agent, right?
Correct. Yeah, I worked with Kevin. Kevin's a serial entrepreneur, Kevin Lancaster. I was at he had government consulting company, and he came up with this idea about dark web monitoring, and I jumped over, and I was the first employee for that.
So give us some insights into the early stages of that. So we've talked about how you built out that Channel Program. What conversations were you having with partners in order to get that trust? What is it that partners are wanting to hear from vendors before they sign on to their program?
Yeah, it's we sort of honestly fell into the channel almost by accident. I'm gonna be,
as so many people do, right?
I know. I'm gonna be honest. I barely knew what an MSP was back then, or certainly not the acronym. But early on, we just got a little lucky. I mean, we had an article written about us in one of the trade publications, and all of a sudden we got some inbound leads from MSPs, and to be frank, we just didn't have a channel program, like not a proper one that was going to work. We had some pricing model, and the first few MSPs, we got really lucky. They were so forthcoming in telling us, hey, this is how you're going to have to position it for it to work for an MSP. And so I think by having that input early on, we honed in on that we have. I mean, it sounds obvious to listen to your partners, but we don't always do it, right? When you're
Right.
moving fast, a lot of times you forget to ask your own customers and things like that. So we were from the day one, listened to our partners and got input and came up with product advisory councils, and that was a huge reason, that we were able to deliver on what our partners wanted, is because we just directly asked them.
Mhm.
I think the other thing I would say is it's important to come up with procedures. Communicating with your own customer base is actually sometimes very difficult. There's
Right.
always, a percentage that reads your messages, reads your product updates. We know getting product updates to the end user of your own customer base, every vendor struggles with that for some reason. And so, it's important to put in procedures and policies and best practices on how you're going to communicate to your partners. And I would say do it in multiple ways.
So policies, procedures, processes, when it came to actually building out your channel program, I'm
Mm.
assuming what you mean by that is the tiering of the program, the margins that you give, the support that you give, that type of thing. What was it about ID Agent's program that you developed over the course of interacting with these early MSPs that became so attractive to other MSPs that let you build out that channel so fast?
Yeah. Yeah. So the biggest thing for us, and it sounds again obvious today, was really building out the partner enablement materials. We were early on when we got on early on with Datto's road shows. And so I got a real opportunity, to see what they had built, and quite frankly, it was probably one of the best, channel programs out there. And I was like, we just have to emulate this, because they had so many raving fans. And I was like, let's, take what they're doing, but do our own version of it. And, we're a very different product company. And we just honed in on that so early on. And, today it wouldn't seem like an incredible platform that we had built for partner enablement, but at the time it was ahead of other vendors, and it completely separated us from any competitor or even just any vendor. I felt very strongly outside of Datto, we had the second best channel program, based on partner enablement. I mean, one of the things we were doing well before anybody else was doing this, I mean, we would jump on sales calls with our partners. We called it goal assist. That was, we just went the extra mile. Every one of us, every person on our staff. I just didn't say no to anybody, to be honest, in those early days. So yeah, in those early days, you have to go the extra mile, and give your partners the time, and they'll become raving fans. And Kris, in this space, you get one MSP that likes you, that can turn into 10 real quick, because they
Yep.
have so many of them are in peer groups and things like that. So
Yeah. And, when it comes to that partner enablement and that support, emulating Datto was not a bad way to go. I
no.
think a lot of vendors make the mistake of thinking that they can just, throw some sales and marketing enablement towards their partners and not really invest that time and that
Mhm.
energy in having those conversations with partners. And that's one of the things over at JS Group, when we do bring these emerging vendors into the channel, we have to train them on, right? Because their
Yep.
direct sales team is not used to having that kind of enablement and support for their channel.
Yep. No, absolutely. The easier you can make it to sell their product, the better to win on both sides. So
Okay, so you've brought partners into the fold, right? And now it's time to onboard them. So let's talk a little bit about onboarding. What do partners really need whenever it comes to onboarding? And how can vendors really help them succeed in getting off
mhm.
the ground and gaining some momentum whenever it comes to moving their product or solution?
Yeah, and this is a little tricky in the early stages as a vendor, and it really depends on how much funding you've had.
Mhm.
I do think a customer success person is very critical to the onboarding. Having somebody whose job is dedicated to making sure partners are onboarded properly and you're continuing to reach out. Now, not every vendor can afford that on day one, and so it can be a little disjointed in the beginning, but they definitely need that walkthrough. They need to understand how to utilize. You can build an amazing partner portal. If they're not using it, it's useless. So they need to have the time invested. You got to get the right people. So you can't just to get it's all going to depend on size of the partners and things like that. But I'm a big fan of trying to get multiple people on those onboarding calls. And, I took a note, I wrote a note, being able to deliver in multiple capacities. Some partners will be able to jump on a call and spend that half hour of like one-on-one time. And that's probably the best case scenario on an onboarding. Have a video, version of it, right? You have to have all these different ways to get it in front of them, and they're going to consume it. Everybody's going to consume it in different ways, but you have to get it to them in all those ways in order to deliver it. And, I think follow-up, continuing to follow up with them, we a channel program, there's going to be, we have some vendors that put in content all the time, right? And then of course you have vendors who don't, not because they don't want to, they're probably busy at other events and doing other things. And so just having that touch point, making sure you're consistently reaching out and making them aware of everything that's available to them. I think those are some of the things I would hone on from an onboarding standpoint.
It occurs to me that that's not just good advice for vendors. That's good advice for MSPs too,
Yeah.
to really pay attention to the customer success portion of that onboarding in order to make sure that your customers and your clients are getting the most benefit that they can out of their stack and really seeing the value that you provide.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so you've onboarded, and now let's talk about that partner enablement a little bit. So you have described yourself as an expert in boots on the ground marketing.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Give us some success stories to kind of illustrate what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably how most people got to know me. I was very fortunate. The agent was very fortunate. We could afford to be at all these events. I was probably at 150 events over a 2.5 year period pre-COVID. And boots on the ground to me just means just straight grit and hustle at events. And there's some strategy around it. Some of it's basic. Some of it's like always being branded, because to me at an event, you jump on an elevator, Kris, there's an opportunity. I mean, you could literally have your elevator pitch. And I actually always make a joke about that. It's very corny, but if you're on an elevator, be like, hey, can I give you guys my elevator pitch? And they'll usually entertain it because it's so stupid, but they'll do it. One of the best kind of, again, it gets kind of into that old term like guerrilla marketing, right? It's boots on the ground, and how do you spread the word about what you're doing? And some of this is circumstance, but our best success story, I would say, was at a Robin Robbins boot camp. I was fortunate enough, I did have a main stage speaking slot, and I made a big announcement about what we were doing, a new product we had. But then I went into 5 ways that our current partners or prospects could essentially gain more. We had basically more value in their contracts. So we were able to give out additional domains to monitor. We were a dark web monitoring company. So basically you could monitor more organizations. So on stage, I said, if you sign up with us at the event, you'll get an extra domain. And if 50 MSPs sign up with us, you'll get 50 domains. So however many sign up, everybody benefits. Okay. And then I said, if you're a current partner and you bring over a prospect to us, you will also get the same deal. We'll add those onto your current contract. And then we had this whole game of like, if you wear one of our t-shirts during the event, we'll give you another domain. Or if you show up to we had a breakout session, and it just created this social selling at its best, honestly. And we went on to sign 87 MSPs at that event. And I'm telling you, people were just bringing us people to sign. Like, it was insane. They were like, have you heard about them? Have you heard about them? And we just kept the sign up there, like, 30 domains, 50 domains, and the number just kept going up. And then it just created this FOMO effect where, honestly, I think on probably that last day, people were just signing up because it got to such a high level.
Yeah.
And I don't even think every MSP had 87 clients to even give all those domains to, but everybody kind of got caught up in the energy, and it was also a good price point and everything. So there was a lot of factors, but it was pure social selling. So that's my best example of boots on the ground type of activity that I ever did. So
created incentives to make partners your biggest brand ambassador.
Essentially, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll give a very small one. And
okay.
I'm very sensitive to vendors and their travel needs, because sometimes you have to break your booth down for travel purposes. You have to get onto a flight. as best you can, if you're there and you have the time, try to be one of the last people to break down your booth, because you just don't know. It's happened to us several times where an MSP would come up to us at the very end of the thing and just say, "Hey, you guys were busy during these other booth times. I didn't have a chance to speak with you." And I remember a specific roadshow we did, and we signed 2 deals. Literally everybody was out of the booth area except for us. Everybody had broken down and they were gone. So if you're able to, I highly suggest that. And all that applies to an MSP too. When you're doing trade shows, things like that, you can do the same thing. But again, I'm sensitive to travel needs. If you got to go, you got to go. But
Well, that was going to be my next question. So how do we take those strategies that you employed for promoting and building a vendor organization? How can MSPs take that and apply it to their own business? Because, it reminds me, we see so many MSPs that rely just on networking and referrals and word of mouth as like their only avenue of marketing, right?
Yep.
So I would imagine that being able to create brand ambassadors out of your current client base would probably be right up their alley.
No, absolutely. That's a great way to do it. The other one I was just thinking as you were asking the question, is partnerships. So many, when we were an up and coming vendor, we did webinars. To me, that's the lowest hanging fruit. Doing a vendor, a conglomerate of vendors coming together, putting on thought leadership. That's easy. That's low hanging fruit. An MSP can work with law firms. They can work with professional services. They're all using the same customers essentially. And, if you're selling cybersecurity, it's very easy to go and reach out to a cyber security insurance company because they're wanting to get in front of the same audience. They'll drive a lot of the audience for you. So I think that's one of those easy things. And quite frankly, I think they could borrow from what they're seeing vendors do. I go out to Fortune 500. I look at what they're doing, and I bring some of those tactics back to us. It's on sometimes it's on a lower scale, but I think they can do the same thing. You've participated in what we call our all-star event, where we bring in, a really big thought leader. We've had Gary Vaynerchuk just did an interview with Damon John, but that can be done at a local level for an MSP. Yeah, they don't have to bring in Magic Johnson or Wayne Gretzky, but you could find, and actually I think local athletes are some of the best to do because they're retired, they're in their area, and they're well known, and people just love athletes in general. And if they don't have to be Magic Johnson level, but if they became a professional and they're well known in your area, people love to hear that story. I mean, they've reached the heights of their profession. And so again, team up with different companies, bring in a nice thought leader that's not super expensive, but will help drive some attendance. And you can literally do the same thing that the vendors are doing, in the MSP space. So I think there's a lot that can be borrowed and just brought down to the local level.
It's one of the things that a lot of conversations are centering on right now when we are talking to MSPs is that partner ecosystem, right? The opportunity that comes with that partner to partner collaboration. And I think that a lot of MSPs don't think about that in terms of alternative partner types, like you were saying, the CPA firms, the law firms, even MSSPs or the cybersecurity insurance providers. I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there within that ecosystem that's just so broad that MSPs would do really well to explore.
Yeah, and user tip, law firms have a lot of money, and so they can put on good events to team up with them. So
So how do you think channel vendors need to evolve their marketing strategies today? 2022 is obviously a very different landscape than it was just a couple of years ago. We are steamrolling very quickly into 2023, kind of getting used to this new paradigm. So things have really had to pivot. So how do you think vendors need to approach marketing today versus what they were doing just 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, and I'm gonna be honest, it's slightly self-serving because it plays into what we're building here. But I wouldn't have done it if I didn't believe 100% in what I'm telling you. An ID agent built its entire thing on in-person events. But I think everybody learned, and in-person events are here to stay. But I think traditionally that has been the main play for a lot of vendors in this space to grow their business. And it still should be. It should be a big part. I think it should probably be only about 50%, not 100%, which it probably was back in the day for like ID Agent. I think we learned with COVID that you have to have, different marketing activities. You can't have it all in one place. The fact is 60% of MSPs attend one or less events in person. We think as vendors, and I'm just as guilty of this, that all MSPs attend events because we see the same ones all over and over again. I can tell you, I thought I knew everybody. When Kaseya acquired ID Agent, we went to their show for the first time, and I was like, I don't know any of these MSPs. It's because of the different ecosystems, right? You got the ConnectWise ecosystem, the Enable ones, and things like that. So, they don't all attend, they don't all have the time. And, now obviously where the economy is, the prices of in-person events haven't gone down. They continue to go up, and travel has gotten insane in terms of costs. And so, and I think as vendors, we also forget the time spent, not just the cost, but the actual time spent being out. And so we're just saying, you need to have a more holistic approach. Yes, big part is in-person events, but there's got to be different ways. And so, that plays into what we're building, with opportunities to speak in front of audiences in virtual capacities, do product reviews, that type of stuff. That's what we're building towards. We just know that there has to be different ways to get in front of them in virtual capacities. And, I'm not all for the shift and completely going virtual. We all experienced that during COVID, and it's not as fun, but there's a balance between all of it that you have to, that I know that channel companies now have to shift and cannot put all their eggs in that single basket.
One of the things that I've been struggling with is trying to talk to vendors about that follow-up process. So whether it is a virtual webinar or it is an in-person event, when you get those leads, I mean, my God, the number of generic emails that I get after going to one of these events and that vendor getting my lead, hi, Kris, I'd love to take a chance to talk to you about XYZ. And, it's not personalized. It's not really targeted to me. It doesn't address my needs. Those things take a lot more time and resource, but when you really pay attention to that, does it pay off more? I know that your vendors over a channel program really do manage to get a lot of leads and meaningful leads, warm leads, because they've actively, shown an interest in the product. So when you're talking to these vendors, how do you talk to them about the follow-up process?
Yeah, and I think it's something we're continuing to evolve, but I think you hit it right on the head. It's like as much as you can personalize this type of stuff, is going to be the better, right? You got to address the problems. I see emails all the time, and I'm sure I've been guilty of it too, but I try my best to, when I read these emails, so many people bury the actual value so far down the email that everybody misses it, and so, you have to, like, when you do these follow-ups, imagine if it's a random person or random vendor sending it to you, like what's going to catch your attention, because every once in a while my attention gets caught, I know most people don't love jumping on random sales calls and things like that, but there'll be things that get my attention because they address something that clearly is, sometimes it's just taking a little bit of research. LinkedIn is just like a treasure trust
gold mine. Yeah.
You can just make a comment on something that you saw, and people just appreciate a little effort, right? It's no different than when somebody comes in for an interview and they've done some research. You're like, okay, like that's they crossed that off. They've done something. And I think, and this kind of goes back to, again, what we were building out is, with an in-person event, it's that one touch, and it's a great touch. You're in person. What we're trying to build is ROI over the entire year, right? So like you get that opportunity to pitch your product on like a channel pitch, for example. You have the opportunity to do thought leaderships through like all-star events. And, what we're trying to build is, how do you approach it from 3 to 6 months of reaching out? Because we know the buyer's journey is not always immediate. And one of the things that we've built out, I think is pretty cool, is, we allow the vendors to answer a bunch of the frequently asked questions that an MSP wants to know, which is, do you white label? What are your contract terms? All these questions, and they can pick and choose, do you do endpoint pricing? And so now if you go on a certain vendor, you might have the 10 questions that you would have had to ask them. You have that in advance. And so it's such a better than conversation, because now when you have the conversation with them, you're not spending all the time doing that. You're actually spending the time talking about what problem you can solve for them. So that's the type of stuff we're trying to bring that journey, to make it easier for the vendors to have those conversations.
Yeah, and like I said, I know a lot of our vendors have seen a lot of success with that too over at Channel Program. So that's the question that I'm going to close with. What is it that sets the successful partners or vendors who pitch on Channel Program? What separates them from the pack of everybody else? So when you're looking at, all the vendors that have ever done their pitch on Channel Program, the ones that have really excelled, what is it that they're doing differently that really separates them from everyone else?
Yeah, so we talk about 5 areas to kind of focus on, and we have conversations with vendors ahead of time. And the point of pitch was to say, cut out the BS and even cut out the educational part of it, because at an in-person event, and it's fine, education is important. I always led with education, but in general, MSPs know security is an issue, so you don't actually have to tell them that on a pitch. They'll get all that education at those events. At pitch, it's like, comes down to, what problem do you solve? What makes you different? What's your pricing structure? What's your channel program look like? And how do you make me more efficient, more cost effective, or how do you make me money? Or how do you make me more secure, depending on the offering? But the 2 that I think separate the most are the ones who spend the most time talking about what problem they're solving and really what makes them different, because that is ultimately what MSPs are wondering, because there's so many options out there right now. I think of like security awareness training companies, and ID Agent was part of that, and it is a crowded space. So what makes you different? That's the ultimate question. And in 2023, we're actually thinking about, we're going to probably launch competitive pitches where we have the same type of companies on a single pitch, so that they can address this directly and have the MSPs evaluate it on their own. And what's really cool, Kris, and you probably have, I don't think you've got a chance to look at this, or maybe you have, we've got these things called channel charts that are direct feedback, basically taking all the feedback the MSPs are giving during those pitch events and putting them in a digestible format for the MSPs to evaluate the stack, and literally who separated themselves from the pack during the pitch events. You can now go on Channel Program and look at all the results of the last 12 months.
That's awesome. I haven't seen that. You'll have to send me one. So that
I will.
So when you're talking about tell partners why you're different, are you talking about the product? Are you talking about the program, or both?
I think it's both. Yeah, I think that's it. You're going to have to address both. They want to know very specifically, like what makes your actual product very different, but they also want to know why your channel program is different than others, for sure. So I think you have to hit both.
How are you going to help me make more money easier?
That's a great way to put it, right?
Yeah. Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it.
No, it's always a delight to talk to you. And I don't know, are you going to be at IT Nation next week? Well, hopefully I'll see you there. All right, perfect.
Yeah. So for all of you out there watching us today, thanks for joining us. If you want to get some deeper advice from Matt about any of the topics we've talked about today, head on over to his expert profile at channelwise.com. The link will be put in the post, or if you have any other questions, just reach out to us on the website and we'd be more than happy to chat with you. Until we talk again, I'm Kris Blackmon, Chief Channel Officer over at JS Group, here with channelWise, wishing the rest of you a great rest of your day.